Yeah, well, we've been scurrying to get ready, very excited. Michael Palin is a big deal, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Thank you for doing this. Don't forget, you can hear the full-length, longer version wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, thank you. I've never been described as a big deal before.
I like that. Of course you have.
Slightly dodgy.
Of course you have.
That's Chicago sort of slang for something.
What do you mean? You're just being self-effacing. You've been described as a big deal many times throughout your career.
I know, it's difficult to believe it, though. I just don't. I'd rather just do the work, and then people can describe me as a result of the work. That's a good bit of work, that's a bad bit of work. But that I should become somehow a figure of some admiration. Yeah. I've never been able to deal with that terribly well.
That must have changed, though, when you started the travel shows, because then you're saying, this is me, and prior to that, you'd always been a character.
Yeah, no, it was very good doing the travel shows because I could be quite self-effacing. I mean, the idea of the travel shows, you just go around the world making mistakes, and nobody's going to edit it out and say, take 3, as was the case in documentaries. At that time, people went around the world. It was Alan Wicker, and it was people who were authoritative reporters, and they would do 1.5 minutes of, spontaneous summing up to camera. And they were very good at it and all that. But I was just somebody trying to buy a ticket in an Egyptian railway station without knowing any Egyptian, and without even knowing where I was going. That was the idea. So a lot of what came out in the travel shows eventually was me.
Yeah.
And I rather enjoyed that because I didn't have to put anything on. I didn't have to pretend to be competent.
And that was all real then. So that journey really did, there must have been a degree of planning, but it just unfolded.
Well, there was a lot of planning, I had to go into it, and especially around the world in 80 days.
Yeah.
That was going to be a one-off. No one knew whether it would work or not. And I remember just thinking, hey, I'm going around the world, being paid for by the BBC. This is fantastic. Until the morning I woke up and we were leaving that day. And I woke up about 4 a.m, my heart thumping and in sort of cold sweats. And what am I going to do? Yeah. The camera's going to be there in 3 hours' time and it's going to follow me for the next 80 days. What am I going to talk about?
So when you started doing Around the World in 80 Days, how quickly, because you seemed incredibly relaxed on camera, of course, and authoritative in your own way, how quickly did you become comfortable with that?
It took about 3 episodes for me to realize how to do the go through the process and what sort of journey around the world this was going to be. But then when I got onto the Dow, which was the 3rd episode of Around the World in 80 Days, everything had gone wrong. And this proved our saviour, the fact that things had gone wrong. We had to improvise.
Yes.
We had to take a Dow from Dubai to Bombay, which we hadn't researched. The one we had chosen we couldn't use because the ship couldn't get to Oman. I mean, it's all very complicated. So we end up on a boat with 18 Gujarati fishermen, none of whom speak English, going very slowly down the Persian Gulf, where bits of flotsam from the recent war were floating. And then, I was on this ship for 7 days, and after a bit, you realize there's nothing you can do but be yourself, talk about the situation. There was no hiding place. Yeah. We all slept out on deck and all that. And gradually, as we got through, we just got to know the crew. And although we didn't speak the language, we were able to sort of, communicate. I had a blow-up globe and things like that, so I'd show them where I was coming. When there was a fish was spotted, and we'd all go to the side of the deck and try and pull it in. So I'd help them out. And just a rapport happened between us. And at the very end of the 7 days, and the 8th morning when we had come to Mumbai, it is now, it was time to say goodbye. And it was nice. They just shook my hand. And this old guy, Kasim, to whom I'd played a Bruce Springsteen tape on my Walkman, he just gave me a hug. He just grabbed me and hugged me. And I thought, this is it. This is the way I want to do this series.
Yeah. I remember that episode. I remember you playing Kasim, the clip. You had a cassette of The Wild, the Innocent, and the East Street Shuffle.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Because I'm a Bruce fan, so I went, Michael Palin likes Bruce. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by Saturday Night Live in America. Tell me about your involvement with Saturday Night Live. Because Python's revered everywhere.
Yeah.
Would you say that in America, that's the peak of the kind of reverence for Python?
Yeah, I think that was where the madness was most intense, because we never expected Python to break in America. We've been told by various people this kind of humour just doesn't travel.
Well, but to be fair to those people, I think I would probably have said the same thing. It seemed so. Well, it was universal in how surreal it was, and yet it was very British.
Yes, and all the illusions very British. And I mean, there are lots of things there, nobody would understand unless you'd read sort of advanced French at university, something like that. But there was a silliness to it, which sort of, I think, leavened the whole thing and made it acceptable. But they said, no, you can't go in America because it's all commercials. You won't make it. But that's when public broadcasting, PBS in America, came in and absolutely saved our bacon. A guy in Dallas, Texas, was the first person to put Monty Python on in America. And he bought a few shows from New York, a few tapes, and put them on one night. And they went very, very well. So he rang the BBC and said, "You got any more?" "I've got about 5 or 6. And someone went down to the basement, BBC New York, and found 40 other Python shows, which he bought for Dallas and played them over the weekend, one after the other.
Right.
Because that's the way things are done in America. If you've got something you really like, wow, go for it. So from that moment on, within a sort of certain circuit, of college circuit, of America, Python really took off.
Wasn't Elvis a huge Python fan?
Yeah, those two just don't go together, do they? This is one of those things that, it's one of the proudest things of my life when I heard that Elvis loved Python, and particularly the Holy Grail, I think.
Yeah.
He like the night you say Nick, and I just the thought of Elvis, this man.
He would have sat there.
He would have sat there,
and he would have talked to his buddies and gone, man, those nights would say Nick. Yeah. It just doesn't feel right, does it?
Doesn't really. I wish I could be one of those nights. They're great. They say Nick, Is that so, Elvis? Yeah, they say Nick. What else do they say? Oh, come on, guys. They say Nick. So I don't know how it went with them, but it is lovely to think that this hero of my lifetime really changed my whole attitude to sort of music and entertainment. Should have been a Python fan.
That's one of the great things, though, isn't it, about the world of entertainment or the world of show business, is that if you do something, these like you said about Python spreading around America, and you just never know. And it's always amazing when someone that you love and they don't get bigger than Elvis, turns out they like your thing.
Another, of course, the great moment was Johnny Cash. And Johnny Cash, another absolute hero, who I was on a TV show, and he comes into the green room and sort of ignores everybody, comes straight across to me and says, "John Cash, big fan."
No.
John Cash, big fan. 4 words that have resounded through my life. So however miserable I feel, however low, however bad things are happening to me, I remember John Cash, big fan.
Oh, that's glorious. I started this bit off by talking about SNL. So Saturday Night Live. So you hosted that once, twice?
4 times.
4 times a lady. That's very good, isn't it? Wow.
But my most favourite memory was, if you'll indulge me on this, the last time I did it, I was in New York with my mother, and it was her 80th birthday trip, and I'd given her a trip to New York with my sister. We got on Concorde. We got to New York because I was hosting Saturday Night Live that week. So anyway, we have the writers' meeting the first day up in 30 Rock. It was just, Rockefeller Center. Again, you felt you were walking on sort of the air. It's just incredible going in there. Anyway, and the first thing they say, "What brought you to New York?" No, this is, you come to New York. I hear you brought your mother. And I said, "Well, yeah, because she's 80. and she's never travelled really apart from one plane trip to Paris. She's never been by plane. And so they talked about it, and Lorne said, you know, in the opening monologue, you know, do your monologue, would your mother be prepared to come along and be part of it? And I said, gosh, she's 80. I mean, it's not going to be on, you know, American national television, 45 million people watching. So I said, well, nice try. And I went back to the room and I told my mother this. And she said, yes. Oh, yes, that would be very nice. I mean, she thought it was just like walking down Fifth Avenue or something, or going to a bookshop. Oh, yes, yeah, I'll do that. And she came along. And in the opening monologue, I was doing my piece and she was on a chair sitting on the set. And then I came on and did my piece. And occasionally she would just tug my coat and say, straighten my clothing out and say, you know, your trousers to me. Why do you wear that pair? And so that's how we did the opening monologue. And she was so successful, they gave her 3 or 4 more intros to do to some of the rock and roll bands. This little 80-year-old lady down in the basement saying, you know, their things. So but that was a great moment. Yeah. And that shows Lorne Michaels, you know, making quite risky decisions. Yeah. And it paid off.
He's a remarkable man, a fascinating man. It's a very singular character, isn't he?
Very singular, yeah. Little kind of Canadian guy. A lot of Canadians on the show. Of course, there's Bill Murray. I became quite good friends with Bill.
Did you?
Because he was one of the first. It was one of his first appearances on one of the shows I did. It was a new Bill Murray thing, and so you know you had the Belushis was kind of quite starry, and they would go off in a limousine somewhere and smash a place up or whatever. But Bill being more junior in the cast at that time, he sort of, we got together and went and had sort of meals and drinks and all that, and him and his brother. And we got very friendly. And we go out, and Lorne would organise evenings. So, you know, come on, we'll just have dinner. We're going to have a little dinner. I'm like, Michael, will you come along? Paul will be there, and Martha and the Vandellas, and Diana may drop in. So there we are having a meal with Diana Ross sitting next to you and all that. Oh, yes, I'm from Sheffield.
Well, you're from Sheffield, but you're from Monty Python as well.
Yes.
You know.
But she was only interested in Sheffield.
Was she really?
Yeah.
I
remember once my wife made a terrible gaffe. Well, it wasn't a gaffe, just saved in time. We were there in the restaurant, and Paul Simon wasn't at our table, but he was at another table, and he comes across. There's only these little figures there, and we were all sort of just about deciding what to eat. And Helen sort of turns around and says, I won't have the shrimp. Oh, God, I suddenly realised she talked to Paul Simon, living legend.
Here's Paul Simon calling now.
Paul,
I think I heard myself being discussed.
Paul, I'll turn that off. Which it was him too.
Oh my
Paul
God!
Simon.
What are the chances of that?
But that was chances.
You should have taken
God.
it.
Well, he'll probably ring tonight.
You know what he's having to listen.
He rings in the evening.
You know what he's having to listen to now, don't you?
What?
The Sound of Silence.
Oh yes.
And that's this week's joke.
That's this week's joke.
Yeah,
good.
that's that.
I think that's good.
The last time I saw you on stage was on the last night of those incredible Monty Python shows at the O2. And we talked about this in Bristol, but most of these people weren't there. So let's indulge again.
Yeah.
These were the reunion Python shows after many years of not being together, put on at the O2. And it was the most remarkable thing. I described it, rather cleverly, I thought, as a secular church discuss.
Oh. Well, what can be said after that?
Well, you could say yes, or you could say what rubbish.
But that's not discussion. I agree with you. It was,
all right.
That is a very good description. It was like a sort of religious mania there. I mean, the people, the moment you stepped on stage, you realised that, you know, whether you remember your words or not didn't matter. Whether your trousers fell off, it didn't matter. It's just you were there, and anything you did would be met with enormous sort of...
The happiness in the room.
Hands raised and all that.
The happiness in the room was incredible.
And I think that was the odd thing, because we've never known that before. We've done a Python stage show. We did one in Coventry in 1972, I think it was the first one. And the first 2 rows were all people with gumbies. They had knotted handkerchiefs on. So there was something slightly sort of religious about it, even at that time. But 15,000, as there were each night at the O2, it was just odd because really you just had to be there, and you had to get on stage and you just start the sketch, and they'd be with you. I mean, I think there were sort of nights when sketches went better and went worse, but there was always that fantastic feeling of 15,000 people who all loved Python all together. So it's about an audience loving itself, really, and loving being
there was an element
there.
of that.
That's looking at others and the way people were dressed, and people would come over from Norway dressed as carrots and all that sort of stuff.
There's also an element of the audience watching it and kind of celebrating their past, celebrating the fact that they're still there now. You know, I'm still alive, still here. These people that are part of my life. How emotional was it for you? Say you stood on the stage and you're doing with John Cleese, you're doing the dead parrot sketch. When you're doing that, is it emotional? Do you look at John Cleese and you go, my God, you've been a big part of my life. We've known each other. I mean, I'm sure you've had your ups and downs and differences, but you're looking at somebody who's played a significant role in your life. Was it emotional or was it not?
I mean, I don't mean to be sort of bring it all down to level. We're just trying not to sort of crack up because, we've done that so often. And we know the lines, and we know, no, he's resting, I wake him up then. You just know those lines. And to know, there we were with 15,000 people watching this. And that's not the way it should be played. I should say that. This is not a sketch for 15,000 people. This is for, about 100 people in a room or on telly.
And yet it is, though. And yet it is, because the way it was received. So am I being a bit Welsh and a bit emotional in saying to you, did you feel emotional? And you say, not really, we're just trying to remember the words.
I know, I'm being very English saying just to remember the words. Of course, it's a bit emotional, but because when we laughed, when we were doing Dead Parrot, in front at O2, and there were moments when we just couldn't stop laughing, was just because we were enjoying a friendship. We were enjoying our ability to play this particular sketch. And for it still to be massively approved, and knowing that if we just said an odd line or ad-libbed or something like that, that would go into the mix as well. I mean, very little of what we did on the O2 was as good as we'd probably done it before, sketches and all that, because it's sort of it's swollen in a sort of setup like that. But there were certain things that did work okay. That was very indulgent. The Dead Parrot. And there were times when I just remember there was all the furniture on stage was on wheels.
Yes.
And so we're doing that, and John would be doing one of his, excuse me, and he'd lean on the little trolley, and the counter would move off about 3 feet. And so there was a lot of that moving the counter, and that cracked me up because I do laugh very easily on stage. And John can make me laugh more than anybody else. There's just something about a moment of timing, and he'll look. And then our long relationship will make me fall about, because it's been, generally on stage, a very good relationship. It's been about humour. It's been about comedy. Why shouldn't we laugh at our own stuff?
Yeah. But on the last night, I was there, and I left just a little before the end and went under the stage and encountered you as you were coming down. You don't remember. It was a far bigger deal to me, Michael, than it was to you.
Let me say, I do remember.
And we had a chat, and you were drenched in sweat.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, this is a bloody moment, isn't it? I'm talking to Michael Palin after he's come off after the last Monty Python sketch. And he's standing underneath the stage, and all there's Cleese and the others are all going by. I thought, this is pretty special. Well,
that's very nice, really. I mean, that was part of the enjoyment, because people did come to see it of your stature, and others would come along, and you just could share joy and relief at being 75 and still having, got the audience on their feet in the O2. And then to meet somebody who came up, of course, I probably gave you a hug, did I?
I think you did. I think you did.
A sweaty hug.
It was terrific.
Yeah, because you just feel fantastic, and you meet people you admire, and that's nice too. You feel sort of one with them, and people in the green room would come along. Lots of Americans would come there. A lot of the people.
I think Mike Myers was there the night that I was there.
Yes, I think he was We did a sketch.
He came on, didn't he? He came on,
yeah.
because I think we were in a room. Yes, we got to know him. We've mentioned names like John Belushi, Paul Simon has come up. Here's another name, Ken Dodd. You had an involvement with Ken Dodd early on in your career?
Yes, yeah. I mean, Terry, I was doing this pop show in Wales.
Yes.
Terry Jones had joined the BBC and was a sort of, I mean, he was kind of writing links, comedy links for various people.
Yeah.
Terry, very good English degree from Oxford, but he ended up writing a for Russ Conway, little sort of jokes about, you go to Costa Brava or Costa Five or all those terrible things. And Ken Dodd was, again, one of the BBC stars, and he had to write occasionally little links.
Yeah.
Which was very presumptuous of us. There was Eddie Brabin, who was his great writer. It was just brilliant.
Yeah.
We'd have to put these little things together to get Ken from from one part of the set to the other. And Ken liked to know who he was working with, so we went to the Palladium, saw his show and went back afterwards.
Yeah.
And to meet him, and it was extraordinary because Terry started humming, as he does when he's a bit nervous, in the dressing room. Out, says Ken Dodd. You mustn't. Very bad luck, as you know, as a thesp.
Yes.
Very bad luck to sing in the dressing room.
Yeah.
Go outside and turn around 3 times and come in again. And Terry just thought he was having a laugh, And you saw in Ken Dodd's eyes, no, absolutely meant it.
Really?
This was the suspicion of the theatre. So it went out.
He lived his life in theatres, though, didn't he? Because he was constantly touring.
Oh,
so.
I mean, and he was a genius. But then Terry lived in South London. I was going up to West London, and Ken said, "You can come in a taxi with me." Again, it was a rather great moment. So I go in the taxi, and we get to Kensington High Street, where he drops me off, and he said, that's £6.10. I said, what? £6.10. That's your share. So I paid him £6.10. And that was it. So it
wasn't a gag. He really wanted the money.
He just played another sellout at the Palladium. But I thought, that's great.
The money went into a shoebox that went under the bed and remained undeclared to this day.
Yes, well, we know about all that.
Yes,
but
if you're not aware of it, just Google it. If you're a lot of my young fans, you see, Michael.
Fans.
I bring in a lot of the young crowd.
Younger than you think? Really?
Could you? Well, that's a lot amazing. Of scope. There's a lot of scope for them to be younger than me.
Oh well, you're blessed with having good features and quite good skin.
No one's ever called my skin good before, but I'll take it from Michael Palin. Listen now, before we...
I haven't got my glasses on.
We'll leave that out of the quote. Before we wrap up, what more could you possibly want to do? What do you're in a new... You are, with Helen's passing,
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. You're at a new... a very distinct now new phase of your life. Well, are you already thinking, or is it too soon to think about what
Fortunately, I had 2 sort of obligations to fulfill. One is a book about my great-uncle Harry, who died in the First World War. And I'd virtually written that before Helen died, but I've got to do now the final putting together of the book. It's coming out in September. There'll be all the publicity.
Yeah.
So that has to be done. I'm also doing another travel journey sometime.
And you haven't mentioned comedy in these things going forward. The book about your great uncle Harry, the travel show. What about comedy? The last comedy thing I think of with you, and correct me if I'm wrong, was The Brilliant Death of Stalin.
Oh yes,
that was so good.
Yeah.
Armando Iannucci,
fantastic team to be with. Also, wonderful cast. I mean, I might do that. It's funny with comedy. I feel I've done so much, and I've done it up to a certain standard.
You've got a very high
Python,
benchmark.
It's quite difficult. So where do I start writing comedy again? I mean, every day I could write sort of comedy stuff. I get ideas, and I still laugh a lot. But it's actually the comedy success, I suppose, gave me the chance to do other things like traveling. And the traveling led to learning more about the world. And then that interest in my relatives through this photo of my great uncle Harry, which suddenly blossomed into a book. That was because people said, well, you've done this, that, and the other. Try this. So I'm very fortunate to be able to diversify.
So you just wait for, in the hope that something as good as The Death of Stalin, because when something like that comes along, I would have thought that was a no-brainer. You just go, I want to be part of that group. Yeah.
Well, there's always a bit of acting. I quite like acting.
Yeah.
But I don't quite know what sort of character to play now. But anyway, so there we are.
Okay. We could carry on like this, Michael, for another minute and a half. But I know you're busy. Thanks for coming in and doing this.
Yeah, I've got a movie to shoot in the next minute.
Yeah,
so
you've got that, haven't you? And you've got that stage show.
Absolutely.
And that new cooking program of yours is...
that's on the Hob.
I was kind of...
On the Hob, it's
I got it, yeah.
It's 8-part series, On the Hob.
That is called On the Hob.
Oh, it was called On the Job, but, we were told we were not doing that.
Now he
ITV
springs into life at the end of the interview. Now he starts to do stuff. I was going to say to you before you go that one of the important things with podcasts I learn is to get those moments of something that can be clickbait. So if you could just be angry with me for a second and we could use that as a trailer, as if we've fallen out. I mean, a lot of your work has been quite poor, hasn't it?
Yeah, you're right.
No, don't agree with me. You've got to be angry with me. Then we could use it as clickbait.
You're saying what you feel now. I think that's good to get it out because I know it's all bottled up in you.
But I've come here for an argument. I wanted an argument.
No. You asked me here today purely in order to get out all the problems you've been having about my work in the past. I understand that. It's a syndrome. It's... I'll pretend I love him, but there are one or two things I didn't like, and actually there are more things I didn't like than I did like. But how do I put them to him? Well, I pretend I'll make up this idea.
It's about 50-50. It's about 50-50. I mean, and I've had to search hard to find the things I like. So you're not going to get angry with me so that I can use it. Well, I'll get angry with what a dreadful guest. There we are. That'll be good. We'll use that as a trailer.
Oh, shut up.
That's good. We'll use that as well. Michael, thank you so much.
Great.